the clock. The line was protected by a constant military.
Spruce up your sleep this spring. Right now, you can save up to $400 on select Sealy mattresses. The spring semi-annual mattress sale is going on now at Ashley. Click the link for better sleep and savings.
Presence, with troop training being carried out in the vast covered forest surrounding the railway. A base had been established in Mirku, meaning that heavy troop trains often ran over the route, often double or even triple-headed at times. Due to the heavy stresses on the railways during this time, huge quantities of ballast were often needed to repair worn-out sections of line. This meant that Soma Quarry became incredibly busy during this conflict, with huge trains of ballast leaving the site every day to assist with the war effort. The two tank engine twins, numbers 1 and 2, were worked very hard during these times, but struggled on until the end of the war, being rewarded with full overhauls once the conflict had ceased. Once the war had ended, the military presence died away, and Lord Dark was left to pick up the pieces of his railway, after being heavily used for 4 years with little maintenance afforded. During the evening of the 17th of February 1919, a carriage derailed at Manton 4 as a northbound service left the station for Mirku due to a fault with a set of points. The coach was re-railed as quickly as possible, but this minor incident resulted in 134 minutes of delays. In 1920, Lord Dark and his team had managed to return the railway to a decent operational state through sheer hard work and plenty of carefully timed tea breaks. It was in 1921 that Lord Dark met his wife, Patricia Stregalard, whilst cursing at Woolchurch Station because he had stubbed his toe on a plant pot whilst inspecting some rubble. Patricia helped him to a seat and joked with him about his toe, thus beginning their relationship. Later that year, Lord Theodore Dark and Patricia married, with Patricia becoming Lady Patricia Dark. Just 1 year later, she gave birth to their only son, Nathaniel Dark, who would later take ownership of the railway. Tragically, in 1930, Lady Patricia passed away after a bout of illness, leaving Lord Dark to struggle to raise his son alone and run the railway. 1923 brought about the grouping of Britain's vast array of railway companies, forming the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, the London and North Eastern Railway, the Southern Railway, with the fourth, the Great Western, retaining its former title. A fifth railway company, known as the North Western Railway, was formed slightly later on. Due to its geographical location, the Dark Railway was a target for the absorption into the Southern Railway, but in the end, the Dark Railway remained in private hands, thanks in no small part to Lord Dark's determination, skilled arguments, finance, and surprisingly intimidating lawyers. The former agreement with the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway and the South Eastern and Chatham Railway continued to be honoured by the newly formed Southern Railway, despite the previously mentioned takeover attempt. This was due to Lord Dark striking up a friendship with the Southern's chief mechanical engineer, Richard Maunsell, and that railway general manager, Sir Herbert Ashcombe Walker. During 1929, Lord Dark was giving serious consideration to extending parts of the railway. The first plan involved extending the industrial branch at Mirku further to the northwest, as several towns and villages beyond were without a decent public transport link. Work began on surveying the route, and despite some track work being laid, the Great Depression of the 1930s put paid to this extension, with only half a mile of track actually being built, which was later ripped up during the Second World War to supply steel for the war effort. 1933 saw the purchase of the railway's most unusual steam locomotive. Despite the friendly relationship between the two companies, The Southern Railway had consistently failed to provide adequate motive power for the Dark Railway to operate their heaviest trains on the line. To solve this issue, Lord Dark requested that Bayer Peacock build him a powerful tender locomotive. Bayer Peacock responded with a four-cylinder compound 482 with a high-pressure boiler working at 300 psi. The engine, nicknamed Big Bob by railway staff, was put to work hauling the heaviest trains over the line, and did well. Unfortunately, it was not without its problems. Spare parts took time to find, and the high-pressure boiler and compounding were found to be overpowered and overly complicated. Therefore, the engine was rebuilt at Bayer Peacock in 1934 as a simple expansion, three-cylinder locomotive with a conventional operating pressure of 225 psi. In this form, he lasted until the end of the war in 1946, when the locomotive was scrapped. Another extension plan involved in building another branch line off the industrial estate branch close to Manston 4 in the late 1930s, to eventually serve the former army barracks at Meerkin on the outskirts of the city for the upcoming war. Due to the length of time this took to plan, only part of this extension was ever built. In one of Lord Dark's final acts, during January of 1938, he finally decided to officially give his original Hawthorne Leslie saddle tanks names, with number 1 becoming Theo, named after himself, and number 2 becoming Otto, named after his only son, Nathaniel Dark. This was, of course, just a formality, as the two engines had been nicknamed Theo and Otto since the early 1930s. Sadly, whilst waiting for a train at Woolchurch in March of that year, Lord Dark suffered a major heart attack in the presence of his son, who took him to the nearest hospital as quickly as he could. Sadly, Lord Theodore Raymond Dark passed away the next evening, with his son by his side at Royal Meercombe Hospital. Unfortunately for the railway, war was looming on the horizon once again, leaving Nathaniel little time to grieve for his deceased father. The Dark Railway had to continue operating, and so the young man threw himself into his work, despite the deteriorating situation in continental Europe. Despite only being 16 years of age, the now Lord Nathaniel Dark was determined to do his part to lead the Dark Railway through the war, having inherited the railway and its lands, and by extension, the responsibility for its legacy from his father upon his death. Therefore, in conjunction with the Railway Board of Directors, a workaround was arranged. Nathaniel's uncle, Mark Dark, had become his legal guardian, and the two men agreed that Mark should become the acting director and the public face of the Dark Railway, whilst Nathaniel would be responsible for taking care of the railway from behind the scenes. In a similar fashion to events during the First World War, the Dark Railway was pushed to its limits again during the new conflict. Even more supplies were required by the vacuum that was the front lines, and the Royal Air Force recommissioned a former army base on the outskirts of Meercombe, which saw a massive increase in freight traffic across the network and to the local area. Thankfully, the railway was better prepared for the events this time around, and had in its possession an ace up its sleeve, the custom-built Bayer Peacock mountain class number DR1202. This behemoth locomotive became an immediate and increasingly valuable asset to the railway and the war effort, having the ability to haul almost double the load of any other locomotive operating in the region through the duration of the war. The locomotive's performance had impressed the Southern Railway so much that they actually requested use of the engine for their own operations. Nathaniel and Mark agreed, and so For the first time, their massive 482 locomotive ventured away from its home in order to assist with the heaviest war traffic on the main line. Despite its great weight, the locomotive proved its worth and continued to haul trains on the main line until the end of the war in 1945. During these years, the Dark Railway almost exclusively operated heavy freight traffic, with limited passenger services offered due to both safety concerns and the lack of suitable rolling stock. The main source of traffic came from Darker Engineering and Acorn Steel, which were both heavily involved in the manufacturing of heavy artillery and components for army vehicles. On the 22nd of August 1943, a military train pulled by a War Department riddled Austerity class, numbered 7004, collided with a Southern Railway C class, number 1721, at Manston Ford Junction. The C class had been making a light engine move at the time and was erroneously allowed to move into the path of the incoming freight service. The engine crews jumped clear, however, and the guard aboard the military freight was injured in the crash. Several hours of delays were caused while the locomotives and trucks were re-railed. An interesting event occurred during a proposed bombing raid of the area surrounding Mirkun in September 1944, when thousands of people took shelter inside the tunnel beneath Mirkun gasworks to avoid the potential threats from the Blitz. Luckily, the bombing raid did not actually occur, as the German squadron got lost during their flight and ended up bombing the nearby town of Bexford instead. The tunnel was also utilised for another slightly unusual operation during the war. A massive rail-mounted gun named HMG Scene Shifter was brought up to the railway for trials on the branch in order to ascertain the viability of using such a weapon to attack targets on the European continent by using the curvature of the tracks to aim the gun out into the channel. However, this experiment ultimately proved a failure, as the first time the gun was fired, it ran away down the hill into the tunnel that it was positioned on and almost caused it and the locomotive positioning it to crash through the end of the railway lines within the industrial estate. After that incident, this experiment was abandoned and the gun was placed into storage. As hostilities ceased once again, Mark and Nathaniel Dark began the lengthy and expensive task of rebuilding and restoring their railway lines to an operational state once again, as the wartime traffic and lack of maintenance had almost completely ruined the infrastructure of the line. In the early months of 1946, Mark Dark finally decided that it was time for him to leave his nephew to operate the railway himself, and wished Nathaniel a hearty farewell before departing back to his own home in Bournemouth. It was at this point that Nathaniel became known by almost everybody simply as Mr. Dark. The war had taken its toll, not only on the railway, but its locomotives. Numbers 1 and 2, Theo and Otto, required repair work to their cylinders and valves, whilst number DR1202, Big Bob as it was known, was completely worn out and required a heavy general overhaul. The two tank engines were soon repaired, such was their usefulness at the quarry, but the huge one-off DR1202 proved to be a difficult engine to restore. Unfortunately, the railway's board of directors decided that the then out-of-service DR1202 should be disposed of, citing its high maintenance costs, difficulty in sourcing spare parts, and limited usefulness following the war. Unknown to Nathaniel Dark, the locomotive was quietly removed from the railway and scrapped to Eastleigh Works in November 1946. The story goes that when Nathaniel Dark discovered what had happened, he called a board meeting and unceremoniously fired every single member of the board, displaying his own anger and grief at what they had done to his locomotive, which was one of the last remaining reminders of his own father who had passed away in 1938. To alleviate his frustrations, Nathaniel threw himself into his work again, overseeing the strengthening of various bridges and embankments along the line, replacing worn-out infrastructure, and ensuring that his father's legacy would continue on into the future, despite rumours of nationalisation looming in the near future. Due to a host of complicated reasons that we really shouldn't get into, the Dark Railway was not absorbed into British Railways in 1948, remaining a privately owned and operated railway thanks to Nathaniel Dark's vast wealth, social status, resourcefulness, and incredibly efficient law team. Nathaniel would often visit his stations to inspect them, and one particular station, Upway, would be where he first encountered his future wife, Alicia Marsh, who lived in the village there. The two would often talk, and one day, in 1949, he finally plucked up the courage to ask her out on a date, which she accepted. After a romantic evening, Nathaniel and Alicia officially began dating, and continued to have wonderful times, even after the austerity of the war. The two married in 1951 at Church Cathedral, with their only son, Zeke, being born a year later in 1952. Similar to his father's previous relationship with the Southern Railways management, Nathaniel managed to strike up his own agreement and understanding with the British Railway Board, with the two organisations enjoying a relatively peaceful coexistence throughout the 1950s and 1960s. This led to British Railways gaining some running rights over the railway, but ultimately it was decided to loan out engines to the Dark Railway for ease of operation. This arrangement meant that engines could come and go with relative ease, with some staying for extended periods of time, whilst others only remained on the line for a few days before returning to the main line. The railway's original two locomotives, number 1, Theo, and number 2, Otto, were at this point incredibly worn out and required full overhauls. Nathaniel Dark, therefore, withdrew the two saddle tanks from service in mid-1950 and had them sent to Ashford Works for overhaul. On an unrecorded date during the summer of 1952, Dark Railway's number 1, Theo, broke a connecting rod as it traversed the Centre Road at Axley Station. At the same time, an up service happened to be travelling through the platform on its way to Woolchurch, and the broken connecting rod struck the passenger train, damaging a coach in the process. No injuries were recorded, and number 1 was repaired shortly after. One of the more notable allocations to the line came in 1954, when bullied Battle of Britain class Pacific number 34072 257 Squadron was allocated to Mircoombe Shed. Though other Pacifics had come and gone during the years, number 34072 remained a mainstay of the line's heavier passenger trains until its reallocation to Exmouth Junction in 1957, and was popular with both crews and running staff alike. During 1955, the railway acquired its very first diesel locomotive in the form of Class D3/4 shunting locomotive number D4052, later reclassified as Class 10. This locomotive, originally on trial, was so successful at its duties at Mircoombe that the Dark Railway outright purchased it from British Railways, where it retained its BR number and would later gain the name Ryan. On the 15th of October 1957, during a particularly heavy bout of fog, a serious accident occurred at the junction to Soma, just north of Axley Station. An ex-Southern Railway U-Class mogul, number 31612, passed a signal at danger on approach to the junction and collided heavily with a ballast train that had just come off the Soma branch line. The guard of the ballast train and the crew of number 31612 were sadly killed in the accident. Number 31612 itself was also severely damaged in the collision, and the decision was made to scrap the locomotive a short time afterwards. Following this accident, and with the loss of both number 31612 and 34072, Nathaniel Dark began purchasing his own locomotives rather than solely relying on loans from British Railways. Though they had sent another bully Pacific in the shape of number 34090, Sir Eustace Missenden, Nathaniel required more permanent residents to operate the line. This led him to purchase several locomotives, including ex-London Midland and Scottish Railway Stanier Class 5, number 45101, a damaged BR Standard 4-tank engine, numbered 80010, and even an experimental mainline diesel locomotive that had been built on trial by Brush Traction, numbered D1110 at the time, but better known nowadays as number 47527. Having been impressed by D4052's performance, Nathaniel later decided to buy another, smaller diesel shunter for use at Somer Quarry. This locomotive was purchased privately from the Yorkshire Engine Company in 1959 and was numbered D2992 after its build number. This caused some slight confusion for British Railways, who also had a locomotive numbered D2992, and initially accused the Dark Railway of illegally acquiring one of their engines. However, once it had been proven that it was not the case, the matter was quietly dropped. Strangely, despite being purchased for use at the quarry, number D2992 could most often be seen assisting with piloting duties at Meercombe Station.
Real cowboys customize and save with Liberty Mutual.
Hey, Cat, did someone else get a turn?
The new decade began with a great loss, as Nathaniel learned that his uncle, Mark Dark, had passed away and left the railway for several weeks to attend his late uncle's funeral. Upon his return, Nathaniel found that the line was in complete shambles due to miscommunication between engine crews and the duty manager. Things were swiftly pulled back in the right direction, and operations continued as normal. At the end of 1961, British Railways decided to reallocate Bully Pacific number 34090, Sir Eustace Missenden, to Nine Elms Shed in London, leaving the Dark Railway without a Pacific once again. During 1961, an ex-London Midland and Scottish Railway Fowler 3F tank engine, numbered 47407, was purchased from British Railways, causing yet another bout of confusion when number D1110 received the number 47527 for largely unknown reasons. Locomotive crews would often get confused by the similarly numbered locomotives, but after a while, the crews got used to it. Towards the end of 1961, a Fowler 7F 280 was borrowed from the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway in order to aid with an increase in freight traffic from Meercombe Industrial Estate. During its stay, the locomotive, numbered 53802, was involved in a serious accident at Meercombe Industrial Estate after losing control on the gasworks tunnel incline. While there were no casualties in the accident, the locomotive's tender fell down a coal pit at Prairie Coaling Limited and was sent for emergency repairs. The public was treated to the bizarre image of a Fowler 7F partnered with a former London Brighton and South Coast Railway G-class tender, believed to be a relic from the 1913 accident. 53802 left the line the following year, leaving another gap in the roster. To resolve this, Nathaniel arranged to borrow two ex-Great Western locomotives for trial, one being an 062 tank engine and the other being a small six-wheel tender engine. Another diesel shunter, number 08606, was also purchased during 1962. During an icy winter storm at the end of that year, Ex-Great Western Railway 5600 tank, number 5670, slid on icy rails, passing right through Meercombe Station whilst hauling an up goods train. The engine passed through the end of the railway lines beyond the station and was left hanging precariously off the cliffs beyond. Unfortunately, during an attempt to rescue the stricken engine, it lost its balance and plummeted down onto the main road leading into Meercombe Industrial Estate. The locomotive involved in the accident was recovered, but later scrapped. This incident led to the other engine that had arrived on loan, ex-Great Western 2251 class, number 3200, to be purchased by the railway for goods traffic. Another BR standard tank engine, number 80011, arrived on the line at the beginning of 1963, supposedly to assist with suburban services around the railway. However, unlike the railway's other standard tank, number 80011 was very much disliked by engine crews, with reports of poor steering and difficulty in controlling the engine. A bizarre incident occurred during the summer of 1963, when it was discovered that the old abandoned mines to the west of Soma had collapsed, along with the old disused tunnel that led to them. At the same time, 6 locomotives had mysteriously vanished, these being numbers 1, 2, 45101, 80010, 80011, and 47527. 5 of the engines would eventually reappear on the railway several weeks later, whilst the 6th, number 80011, appears to have never been seen again. What happened during that summer remains a mystery to this very day. Several more locomotives were purchased by the Dark Railway during the 1960s, including 2 previous residents in the shape of Bully Pacifics, number 34072 and number 34090, both of which having been withdrawn in 1964 and 1963, respectively. Other engines acquired during this time included ex-Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Class 5 tank, number 50700, ex-Great Western Railway Hall class, number 5930, Hannington Hall, an experimental Hunslet Austerity, numbered 1891 and named Abomination, a Fowler 4F, numbered 44430, unique rebuilt Fowler 2P, number 40590, and ex-BR Class 40 diesel, number D208. In 1967, Woolchurch Viaduct was damaged after number 34090 derailed crossing it. Temporary speed restrictions and single line operation had to be implemented across it, whilst repairs were carried out, causing problems with connecting trains at the junction. A direct service from the Dark Railway to London Victoria was introduced to resolve this issue, hauled by the line's mainline diesels and sometimes the steam locomotives. At the beginning of 1968, a huge storm blew over the railway, causing major structural damage to Axley Station, leading to the station's original canopy roof being destroyed. After this, the station was temporarily closed whilst rebuilding took place. At the same time, Nathaniel Dark decided to finally fix the problem he had had with the railway for many years, the single track section that existed between Woolchurch and Gannon Junction. After much hard work, the doubling of this section of line was completed quickly, with Axley reopening without its iconic station canopy. Lake Holt, which had by this point become disused, was demolished, allowing the new installed double track line to run smoothly through the site. During August of 1968, the most serious accident in the railway's history occurred when London Midland and Scottish Railway Stanier Jubilee, number 45690, Leander, derailed at speed in Gasworks Tunnel. The impact against the tunnel wall caused the tunnel to collapse, taking the defunct Meercombe Gasworks and the housing estate on top of it with it. Over 100 lives were lost in the disaster. An investigation ruled that the cause of the derailment was the poor condition of the track work inside the tunnel, something which had been noted in the months prior. The railway was forced to provide compensation for the victims' families and arrange their relocations. The disaster spelled the end of the Mircombe goods branch, which was forcibly closed and ripped up, with road transport becoming the sole means of transportation for goods out of the industrial estate. The loss of the goods branch coincided with a number of other changes around the railway, which saw it closed to operation during the winter of 1968 and the beginning of 1969. With the closure of the line from Market Labour to Gallen Junction, British Rail opted to cease passenger services to the junction altogether, resulting in the station closure. Despite this, Gallen Junction station remained intact, and the line to Colhapper was retained for freight traffic from Soma. The service to London was discontinued this year due to consistent losses during its operation. Mircombe Station was partially rebuilt during this period too, with Platform 1 being demolished and replaced with a small goods yard. The railway reopened in mid-1969 with a large gala. During this time, the Dark Railway established integral ties with long-time railways associate Caracas Smash, owner of scrapyard and engineering firm Caracas Smash Limited. Responsibility for overhauling and maintaining the running fleet was transferred to Mr. Smash, who saw several locomotives transferred to his works at Saxonhurst for major overhaul this year. Two major incidents occurred between September and October of 1969. An unidentified man was struck and killed by Jubilee number 45725 Repulse, whilst gaining unauthorised access to the Gallen Junction shed complex. Just weeks later, that same complex was destroyed in a major explosion and resulting fire, destroying 3 locomotives in the process. Fowler 3F number 47407, diesel shunter number D2992, and the Class 20 diesel locomotive number D8198. Unconfirmed reports suggest that the explosion had been caused by blasting dynamite acquired from Soma Quarry, though others have suggested that embers from a locomotive's firebox had actually caused spilt diesel fuel to ignite and cause the resulting blaze. After a lengthy investigation, locomotive driver Geoffrey Winters and fireman Lee Dunn were charged with the vandalism of Gallen Junction Motive Power Depot. It is thought that Mr. Winters and Mr. Dunn had sought to vandalise the railway due to a pay dispute with the operating company, though the two men continue to claim that they did not act of their own volition. In November of 1969, the Dark Railway's ex-Great Western Railway Hall class, number 5930, Hannington Hall, caused major damage to the platform face at Otway's down platform due to the locomotive's wide cylinders. Nobody was injured, but the locomotive was sent away for repair at Caracas Smash Limited, whilst the platform at Upway was repaired and reprofiled, along with several other platforms on the railway, to ensure that a similar incident would not happen again. Morale around the railway reached an all-time low in the wake of these tragic events. One ray of sunlight, however, was that a band of volunteers formed to assist the line through the troubling times, creating the Dark Railway Preservation Society. The group set up a headquarters at the old goods shed at Gallen Junction and quickly set to work helping out around the line. The 1970s began with major developments for the Dark Railway. After a year of use as a freight-only line, British Rail officially abandoned the running line between Gallen Junction and Colhapper. Nathaniel Dark promptly stepped in and purchased the line himself, allowing him to realise his long-term ambition of running services to the bustling city of Colhapper. As part of the work to revitalise the section, Gallen Junction's station was restored to operational condition, whilst Axley Station was again rearranged with a brand new replica oval route being constructed along with a goods yard to accommodate trains to and from Soma. The extension opened toward the end of 1970, using the former Platform 1 at Colhapper Station. During 1971, a new shed complex was built at Colhapper on the site of the former diesel depot, utilising many of the former Gallen Junction assets, including its turntable. This year also saw the arrival of the first privately owned third-party locomotives on the Dark Railway. This consisted of Mr. Caracas Smash's BR Standard Class 7, number 70047, his Standard 9F, number 92115, and the Dark Railway Preservation Society's first locomotive, Andrew Barclay Saddle Tank, number 5. The same year, Mr. Caracas Smash decided to relocate his business, Caracas Smash Limited, from its isolated location at Saxonhurst to the site of the former shed complex at Gallen Junction. It was also decided to construct a railway museum on the site too, in order to house some of the locomotives awaiting overhaul and to provide visitors with a reason to stop at the junction once again, something which had been lacking since it had closed as an exchange station. Both projects were completed towards the end of 1971. Locomotives continued to arrive on the railway throughout the early 1970s. This included several further purchases by the Dark Railway and the Dark Railway Preservation Society, and even one privately owned by Nathaniel's son, Zeke Dark, ex-London and North Western Railway G2 Super D, number 49450. The railway faced a small incident in 1972 when the diesel fleet was taken out of action temporarily due to a dispute with their crews over abusive visitors and vandalism that had occurred. The matter, of course, was swiftly resolved. It was also during the end of this year that another locomotive, ex-Southern Railway N15 class, number 785, Sir Madel Della Porte, arrived on the line. 1973 saw the decline and closure of the old Colhapper to Barbourne line due to declining freight traffic from the harbour on the coast at Barbourne. This led to the cancellation of the red herring fish train that had previously run to Meercombe, upsetting certain arrangements on the line. Whilst all of this was happening, Nathaniel Dark had been contemplating his position as manager of the Dark Railway. He had been wary for some time of the fate that had befallen his father, and how Lord Dark had never gotten the chance to step away and enjoy his life away from the railway. He decided he did not want to meet that same fate, and so it was that during an open day in early 1973, Nathaniel Dark officially announced his retirement as manager of the railway. By agreement, he appointed his son, Zeke Dark, as his successor, a decision which took effect later that year. The announcement came as a huge shock to everybody on the day, especially given Nathaniel's relatively young age of just 52 years old. Despite the shock of the announcement, the transition of management went without a hitch, and by the end of the year, Zeke Dark had taken over full operation of the Dark Railway. In an effort to build bridges with the budding preservation movement, one of Zeke Dark's first acts as manager was to begin loaning out some locomotives to start up heritage railways around the country. This included the loan of unique Fowler rebuilt 2P, number 40590, and Fowler 4F, number 44430, to the Castleman's Railway in Dorset, and later he loaned Aspinall Class 5, number 50700, to the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway. Nathaniel Dark remained a member of the railway's board and stayed on in an advisory position for some time, until he and his wife, Alicia Dark, departed on a long cruise in 1975, leaving Zeke to continue with the support of Mr. Caracas Smash and the Dark Railway Preservation Society chairman. Whilst his father was absent from the railway, and inspired by his own research that had begun in 1973, Zeke Dark, in collaboration with Mr. Caracas Smash, embarked upon a project to build a working replica of the Dark Railway's unique Mountain Class 482, which had been scrapped in the 1940s. With funding allocated, and with the project shrouded in secrecy, Caracas Smash Limited began building the massive new locomotive in the autumn of 1975. Operations on the Soma branch during this time were handled by the Dark Railway Preservation Society. The quarry had been winding down operations by the end of 1975, and the industry which started it all came to an abrupt, unceremonious end in December of that year.
Okay,
On a winter's day,
I guess I could
the
suck up on
viaduct
that.
leading to Soma Quarry collapsed after a runaway train had passed over it, causing extensive damage to the structure. With no viable alternative to transport goods, the quarry at Soma
Enough, huh?
finally closed. The viaduct was, however, later reinstated once the railway's insurance company had assessed the damages and helped finance the cost of repair, but this, of course, took some time. The closure of the branch and quarry spelled further disaster for the Dark Railway, as with no further reason to maintain the connection, British Rail abruptly closed the branch line between Colhapper and Horton in 1976. British Rail had the rails lifted quickly and sold the land off for housing developments, severing the Heritage Railway's connection with the national network. Upon returning from his cruise, Nathaniel Dark was informed of this development and promptly departed for London with Zeke in tow. As it transpired, British Rail had violated the legally binding contract it had ratified with the Dark Railway in 1948, which dated back to pre-grouping days and stipulated that the Dark Railway was to have a connection with the national network for at least the next 150 years. Unfortunately, the line to Horton could not be reclaimed owing to the new landowners, so to prevent litigation, British Rail were forced to sell the track bed of the secondary route between Colhapper and Barbourne to the Dark Railway for restoration. Though the line had long been ripped up by British Rail, the Dark Railway's staff, plus members of the Preservation Society, began the arduous task of relaying the line. The first phase of the extension from Colhapper to Belgrave was completed in 1977, with the official opening train suffering a minor hiccup when the railway's Stanier Class 5, number 45101, Dave, failed with locked brakes whilst heading the special service. During this time, two more developments had come to fruition. After Soma Viaduct had been rebuilt, the old quarry at Soma was regenerated as the Soma Mining Museum, allowing the general public to explore the site and mines for the first time in its history. The other development was the rebuilding and reopening of Lake Holt, due to popular requests by local residents and enthusiasts. Both Lake Holt and the Soma Mining Museum reopened on the 15th of April 1978, with a special reopening service being operated by the railway's original two tank engines, number 1, Theo, and number 2, Otto. 1978 also saw the railway play host to a number of visiting locomotives. Two of these had undergone contract work by Caracas Smash Limited and were running for a few weeks before returning to their home railways. One of them, ex-Great Western Railway Grange class number 6803, Buckleby Grange, from the Redwick and Chiltern Hills Railway, was involved in a minor incident at Upway when the locomotive derailed just outside the station. Flaws in the locomotive's bogie design and an excess of speed approaching the station were determined as the cause. Whilst the Dark Railway itself prospered, the Associated Preservation Society fell upon hard times as the 1970s drew to a close. Many of the volunteers who had assisted the society had moved on by this point, either becoming members of staff of the main Dark Railway Company or else moving on to pastures new. This left the society with only a small number of members and very little capital for further investments. Coinciding with this was the expiration of the society's lease of their site at Gallen Junction, though Zeke Dark allowed the society to continue using the site free of charge, knowing of their hardships at the time. Though this helped, the society still had very little money to operate its services, which ultimately led to the decision to withdraw their diesel shunter, number D2217, Mr. B, to save on operating costs. Sadly, more setbacks would occur during 1979, when the society's steam engine failed, followed shortly after by the catastrophic failure of their only other operational locomotive, Class 35 diesel, number D7070. Due to Caracas Smash Limited being closed to outside contract work that year in order to complete its replica of DR1202, the society officially disbanded when the remaining members withdrew their support. This led to Mr. Chairman being given the unenviable task of liquidating the society's assets, beginning with the decision to sell D2217 back to its original owner, Mr. Caracas Smash. The failed D7070, meanwhile, was acquired by the Northwestern Railway Company as a spares donor for their own Class 35 locomotive. As for number 5405, Mr. Chairman decided to purchase the locomotive outright, along with the two auto coaches that it operated with. As 1979 drew to a close, rumours soon spread regarding a mysterious engine under construction inside of Caracas Smash Limited, though all involved with the project denied that any such thing was occurring, as Zeke Dark and Caracas Smash had decided to surprise Nathaniel Dark with the locomotive once it was completed. Thankfully, Nathaniel Dark remained none the wiser, and the secret remained. As of 1980, the Dark Railway is continuing its push to extend the railway beyond the current railhead at Belgrade and towards its ultimate goal of Barbour.
Don't worry, I'm cooking them.
That a rail connection to the
Ladies.
national network could once again be established. 1980 also saw one of the railway's most ambitious and anticipated projects become a reality when Caracas Smash Limited unveiled the completed working replica of the Dark Railway's unique locomotive originally built in the 1930s, number DR1202. Despite some initial teething troubles and hiccups, DR1202, affectionately known as Rick, has become a star performer on the railway and has been adopted as the railway's flagship locomotive ever since. Things are still looking bright for the railway, and it is anticipated that it will continue to operate well into the future as one of the premier lines of the United Kingdom. So, Whilst all of this drama was unfolding on the Dark Railway, Ed and Sid were none the wiser, as they continued to assist the Castleman's Railway with their operations. However, things had changed considerably since the duo had arrived a few years back. Reconstruction of the line had been rapid, with the railway now extending another 2 miles or so to a small station near a country park. This led to a substantial increase in traffic, which was soon exhausting the 2 visiting engines greatly. Helpfully, some of the railway's own engines were now beginning to return to traffic, with the first, Robert, appearing just after the extension opened. Robert was, to say the least, a bizarre engine, as Ed and Sid discovered on the first night that he came to the sheds.
Good evening to you.
Hello there. Hi.
So, you're the ones who have been running this line whilst I've been under restoration?
Yeah, we are. I'm Ed. And I'm Sid.
A pleasure to make your acquaintance. My name is Robert.
Nice to meet you, Robert.
Please, call me Rob. We're friends after all, are we not?
I guess so.
So, you're both ex-Midland Railway machines?
Not exactly. We were both built by the LMS, but to Midland Railway designs.
Ah, I see. I myself am a thoroughbred Great Western Railway machine, through and through.
But hold on a moment. You're...
A 3000 class heavy freight locomotive, drawn up and designed at Swindon Works, of course.
But you're not?
Don't be ridiculous, my boy. Of course I am. I wouldn't be painted in Great Western green, otherwise would I? I wouldn't have a safety valve bonnet, as is the tradition with Swindon-built machines, if I hadn't been built at Swindon.
Wait, I'm confused. You were built at Swindon.
Correct, my dear boy.
Then why do you look like a Great Central Railway engine?
Looks can be deceiving, can they not? But I assure you, I am a proper Great Western engine. I am. I am Great Western and proud. I am a Great Western engine. I am. Can't you see?
Yes, we see it. You're a Great Western engine.
Of course. Of course I am. That's what they told me. Built at Swindon in 1914. Not rebuilt. No.
Okay then. So, now that we've established that you're most definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, 100% a Great Western engine, I assume that you're here to help us, right?
Huh? Oh, yes. The manager says that I'm taking the heavier trains so that you two can work on a rota or something like that. He said another 2 engines were on their way too, but they won't be here for a few weeks. So we will have to manage until then. I'm sure we can do it with a bit of teamwork and coordination.
Absolutely, mate. If that smoke box of yours is screwed on properly.
Well, it's very nice to meet you both. owned by the railway too? Or are you from the supporting trust?
Neither. We're here on loan from the Dark Railway.
The Dark Railway? Can't say I've ever heard of it. What region is it? I assume the Midlands somewhere? Certainly not a Western region branch line. Otherwise, I would know about it.
Southern, just like this line. But our line's in East Kent. But we both used to work on the Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway, so we're familiar with the old Castleman's corkscrew.
Ah, excellent. Then you both have decent route knowledge of the line. Well, I'm sure I will learn the ropes soon enough.
I'm sure you will. Despite his strange tendency to think himself as a true Great Western engine, despite the fact that he clearly wasn't, Rob turned out to be a very friendly engine, soon winning Ed and Sid over with his work ethic and dedication to do good. His great strength meant that he could easily take the line's heavier trains, leaving Ed and Sid to take the other services in turn. A couple of weeks went by before the railway's next engine arrived. When he saw the newest arrival in the yard one morning, Ed took a double take. Useless? But it wasn't useless. As he shuffled over to have a better look, he noticed the engine had a different number and a different style of nameplate, which read Lundy. Ed introduced himself. Hello there! Lundy smiled.
Hiya.
Welcome to the Castleman's Railway. I'll be your host, Ed.
Nice to meet you, Ed. I'm Lundy.
Lundy? What a lovely name.
I'm named after an island, actually. Only a small island, but still.
I suppose they all worship you on this island, do they? Ed had spoken before he had realised how rude this sounded, but Lundy just giggled.
Oh no, the island's uninhabited. Unless you count flocks of seagulls.
Both engines chuckled. So, you're the Castleman's newest recruit?
I am, and it'll be really nice to make some new friends here. It's been so long since I've seen another engine. Not since the scrapyards.
She faltered for a moment. Ed looked pained. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. What matters now is that I can meet other engines again. And what a place to do so. I remember this railway.
Ah, another engine who's worked here previously.
Oh yes. I used to run diversionary expresses to Bournemouth along this line when engineering works were carried out on the main. But I don't recall seeing many Fowler 4Fs coming down this way.
I'm a Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway boy. Only came down this way a couple of times.
Oh, really? I never got up to the old S&D. Shame it was closed.
It was a shame. Me and my best friend ran away from there, though, and we somehow ended up getting preserved.
Well done you. So you live here now then?
Sadly not. I'm here on loan until enough engines are operating to run the service again. Then, me and Sid are going home.
Oh.
Lundy looked quite upset at this. Don't worry, it won't be for a while yet, I don't think.
Oh, that's alright then.
So, you've been under restoration then?
Yeah,
But a voice interrupted her.
Come on then, Ed. Aren't you supposed to be working the next train?
I'll catch you later, Lundy.
I hope so.
With that, Ed steamed away, leaving Lundy to continue raising steam. Soon, Lundy had met Rob and Sid, and she got on well with both of them too. Like Rob, she was powerful enough to handle the bigger trains, and worked in rota with Rob on these services. Things were going well, until the next engine arrived. The engine's name was Harry, and he was an ex-Southeastern and Chatham Railway tender engine. He got on well enough with Lundy, and to an extent, Rob, but the little engine seemed to take a disliking to the two Midland region engines, especially Ed. On his first night there, he refused to speak to them, despite them attempting to give him a warm welcome. Ed had decided to give the newcomer a wide berth, so as to avoid any potential arguments. The last thing he wanted was to cause any trouble. Such was his respect for the Castleman's Railway and its staff. However, one misty morning, things came to a head whilst Ed was shunting. He had a long rake of coaches that he was preparing for Lundy's first train, but didn't realise that Harry happened to be at the other end of the platform, also shunting. Due to the mist, Ed didn't realise that they were on the same line, and by the time he did, it was too late to avoid a collision. He braked hard, but bumped into Harry's tender, causing the little engine to cry out in surprise.
Oh, the bloody hell was that?
Sorry, Harry, I couldn't see you in the mist. Harry moved forwards, then backed into the adjoining platform so that he could speak to Ed.
For God's sake, can you watch where you're going? Bloody Midlers, have you ever shunted coaches before? It's not hard.
I said I was sorry, jeez. It was an accident, fella.
Right, listen very closely. I don't care if it was an accident, a deliberate act of sabotage, or invading Russia in the winter. You stay the hell away from me and keep your other pal away from me too. The sooner you two piss off back to your own railway, the better. We have enough engines to cover us now, even if one of them is complete fruitcake.
Ed could feel his temper rising, but resisted the urge to shout at Harry. He responded calmly. Look, Harry, I don't want to cause any problems.
Why don't you just bloody leave then?
Well,
Well,
I'm here to help the railway until it gets back on its feet.
the railway is back on its feet now. We don't need your assistance anymore.
That's up to the railway to decide. We're staying here until everyone is certain that you lot are up to running the service.
I don't think you're up to running anything, quite frankly, after that little stunt. Why would we want to keep you anyway? What if you do something similar and cause an accident with those bloody cheese graters for brakes? And where are you going?
I'm not having this discussion with you, mate. Ed moved forwards, but Harry was quicker. He puffed straight up to the points and blocked Ed's progression.
Listen here, I'm not done with you yet.
Harry, come on. Don't be like this, dude.
I'll behave however I damn well like. This is my railway. It is not yours. You're a guest here. And if you don't do what I tell you to, then
Are you threatening me?
it's a threat. I promise. You and your little friend better shove off and leave me to keep this line in order. Otherwise, you'll bloody well regret it. Do I make myself quite crystal clear?
Ed didn't reply.
Well then, do I?
Just get out of my way, Harry. I've got elsewhere to be. Harry did indeed begin to move out of the way. But as Ed moved forwards ahead of him, Harry lurched forwards and shunted hard into Ed's tender. Ow!
Disrespect me again. And you'll get more than just a hit to the buffers, old friend.
And with that, Harry backed away towards the other end of the station, leaving Ed slightly shaken. Later that afternoon, Ed made his way back to the shed at Ringwood, where Sid was simmering, waiting to take over from him. He could tell that something was wrong with his best friend as Ed slunk into the shed next to him. Ed? Yes, Sid. You don't look too good. What's happened? Nothing. Don't bullshit me, Ed. You look terrible. Thanks, mate. I know I do. You know what I mean. Something's wrong. Tell me. Ed sighed. All right. I had a bit of a skirmish with that Harry bloke this morning after a little shunting accident. He was trying to goad me into an argument by insulting me and telling me to leave his railway. His railway? He's only been here 5 minutes. We've been here longer than he has. Who helped rebuild the damn railway? If anything, We're more appropriate for this railway than he is. We actually worked on this line back in the day. Ex-Southeastern and Chatham locos rarely came up here anyway. So he can go and royally fuck himself on that count. Well, don't say anything, Sid. I don't want to add fuel to the flames. Sid looked curiously at Ed. That's unlike you. You love a good argument. I usually do, but I don't want any trouble. I just want to do my bit to help the railway out. That's what we're here for. At this moment, they heard a whistle nearby, as Lundy left with her next train to Holmesley. Sid put two and two together, as Ed remained silent as he watched her go. Oh, I see what's really going on here. You're not really interested in the preservation of this railway. You just want to get into Lundy's ash pan. Fuck off, Sid. Well, is it true or not? Of course it isn't. I'm not just a one-trick pony, you know. I can like girls without wanting to bang them immediately. I'll believe that when I see it. But that's besides the point, Sid. I don't want any fuss. I'm just going to keep my smoke box down and get on with it. But you can't let bullies just walk all over you. Or in this case, bullies. Funny man. You've got to stand up for yourself, Ed. Don't let him just push you around. But it was technically my fault this morning. I don't care if you instigated it or not. You can't let him get the better of you. If he does it again, fucking spark him out. I couldn't do that. That's what he did to that Johnson 3F at Wells that one time. He literally called you a bastard son of a whore, Sid. What else was I supposed to do? Exactly. Fine. I couldn't do that again. Well, if you're not going to do anything about it, then I will. Come on, Sid, just drop it. Just keep calm and ignore him. For me, all right, I will. This time, but I'll be speaking to Mr. Knight about this. Oh, please, Sid, don't get the manager involved. If he does it again, I will. All right, fine, but just keep out of his way. If he doesn't interact with us, he can't bully us, can he? He won't bully me, trust me. But Sid was wrong. Harry did indeed try to antagonize Sid, but unlike with Ed, Harry discovered that Sid wasn't about to back down from an argument. You fucking what, mate?
I'm telling you, you're not welcome on these metals.
Dude, me and Ed literally worked along here in the 50s. Never saw your ugly mug around these parts.
Ugly mug indeed. Takes one to know one.
Smart mouth there. All gob and no gut, though.
Ah, a threat from a little compound. A little failed experiment. I could take you in a fight any day of the week.
I'm a rebuilt 2P, actually, you blind bastard.
So you're so bloody well unreliable there to rebuild you. How sad.
Listen here, you jumped up little injector sucker. But Ed had approached as Sid spoke. I told you not to let him get the better of you.
Listen, I've been around long enough to have a name, you know.
Quiet, you! Come on, Sid. Leave it. He's not worth it.
And you can shut up at all. I thought I told you to leave this place, yet here you are.
I already told you, Harry. We're here until the services.
I could care fucking well less. Both of you better get out of here before I do something I really fucking regret.
Fucking try it. Come on then, boy. Try me. Sid, please, come on. Ed backed away as Sid slowly followed. You better stay out of our way and all, Harold.
You're not my friend. You do not have the privilege of calling me that.
Yeah, fuck you too. Ed gave Sid a proper dressing down once they got back to the shed, where Rob was stood trying to mind his own business. I told you not to do that. He started it. Of course he did. He's looking for a fight. Don't give him what he wants. He'll only make our lives miserable if you do. It'll give the manager an excuse to kick our tenders back to Ken. And we're supposed to be keeping a low profile and doing our bit. We can't very well do that if we keep giving in to Harry's tactics.
You know, I had a similar problem to yours long ago. We had a bully in our yard, but you know what we did? We just ignored him, held our smoke boxes high, and carried on regardless. Why, I'm a great Western, and
Shut the fuck up!
sorry.
This is the final straw. I'm going to Mr. Knight.
There, Ed. He's only looking out for you, you know.
I know, but I don't want to have to leave just because one engine hates my tubes.
Take care. Harry's an introverted sort. Just seems a tad grouchy.
But he's not picking on you, is he?
I won't let him. Being a great Western locomotive such as myself, I will not entertain the idea of being bullied by another. I simply will not allow it. You have the right attitude, Ed. Don't let him get to you. But Sid is right in his own way also. Speaking to Mr. Knight might go some way in resolving the issue.
I suppose so. But what if it gets worse?
Then the most pragmatic thing might be to return home. I know that isn't exactly what you want, but if it prevents any more arguments, then perhaps that would be for the better. Not that I nor Lundy would like that, of course. We have become quite fond of you two. It would be a shame to lose such versatile engines.
Ed didn't respond to this. He didn't want to have to leave, but he didn't want to continue being picked on by Harry. Confused and conflicted, he could only wait and see what Sid could achieve with his chat with the manager. He's a nasty piece of work, sir, and I want his harassment of myself and Ed stopped.
Well, this is a most unfortunate turn of events, Sid. I'm really sorry that this has happened on our railway. We try to promote equality and union above all else, and to hear that our visitors are being mistreated by one of our own engines, well, I will see to it that Harry is spoken to regarding his attitude. Rest assured.
It better be, because if he does it again, I won't be happy.
Of course, understandable. Thank you for coming to see me, Sid. I imagine it has been difficult for you in this situation.
It isn't me that's having the hard time. I'm doing this for Ed, because he doesn't want to have to go home just because of a stuck-up little, so-and-so.
Understood. I will speak to him and get this resolved.
Cheers. Whatever Mr. Knight had said to Harry, it seemed to have done the trick, for the time being. Rather than start an argument with Ed or Sid, Harry simply ignored them, deciding to sleep elsewhere on the line, rather than in the main sheds. Ed was relieved, as was Sid. See, Ed, speaking to management has solved your little issue. Things are going great again. Yeah, it really is. I do feel a little bad for Harry, though, having to sleep in places other than here. Fuck him is what I say. Oh. Lundy had just backed into the sheds next to Ed. She didn't look very happy. What's wrong, Lundy?
Oh, Harry's been aggravating me again.
What's he done?
Telling me that I'm stupid for associating with you two. And Rob.
I will reiterate, fuck him. I'd rather not thank you. He's definitely not my type.
I don't know. I just wish everyone would get along.
So do I.
I know you've been trying, Ed, and it's appreciated. And so is everything that you and Sid have done for the railway. Even though Harry cannot see it, myself, Rob, and the railway can. And we value your efforts to help us set up our new home. Thank you.
That's all right. If you're happy, then I'm happy. Ugh, get a room.
Is he alright?
Yeah, he's just very protective of me. We've been friends for so long. He hates seeing me so down. He'd do anything for me.
That's so sweet.
And I'd do anything for him. We've been through so much together. Escaping from the S&D, losing our friend Mac up in Scotland, losing Liz. Ed stopped speaking for a moment, thinking about the untimely death of his first true crush. Lundy sighed.
It's difficult losing a loved one. I lost my boyfriend of 7 years to the scrappers. I had to listen as they cut him up right behind me. I couldn't bear it.
I'm so sorry for your loss, Lundy.
I'll be alright. Time heals all wounds eventually. What's important is that we find new friendships and value what we have now.
Truer words were never spoken.
I'm glad that we were saved, at least. As far as I know, none of my brothers and sisters survived the cursed touch.
But they did. 2 of them live on our railway. Lundy perked up.
Really? You're not just saying that, are you?
Would I lie to you during such a serious conversation? 2 of your brothers live on the Dark Railway with us. 257 Squadron and Sir Eustace Missenden.
Thank the heavens, I'm not alone. After all, I was so worried that I was alone in preservation.
And now you know that you're not.
Oh, that's amazing. That means that perhaps one day I could come and visit you in your railway too. And meet my brothers, of course.
Oh, that would be great. I'll definitely mention it to my owner once I get home. And once you have more engines operating here, I'm sure it can be arranged.
I hope so. That would be wonderful.
Lundy continued to simmer happily at this prospect, whilst Ed smiled to himself, grateful to have made at least one meaningful friendship whilst at Castleman's Railway. Things went smoothly over the next couple of weeks. Harry kept his mouth shut, and Sid did the same. However, one bright morning, Ed was taking on water in the yard, getting ready for his next train. As he waited for his fireman to finish, Harry rolled up to him, looking angry.
Oh, for God's sake, can you get out of the bloody way? I need my water now.
I'll be done in a minute.
But it's too long. Get on with it.
Come on, Harry. I thought we were over this now.
Over this? This? You ratted me out to the manager. You've taken over this railway and strap-iron mate of yours. None of my colleagues respect me now because you poisoned their bloody well minds. I get no respect. It is all your fault.
Harry shot forwards, pushing Ed backwards several feet, severing the water hose in the process.
Oh, look what you made me do!
I...
Now that is a broken water column on your conscience now. You bloody well pay for that.
He went to move towards Ed again, but Ed winced and moved further away. Harry laughed gleefully.
You see now the superiority of me? You are weak, pathetic, and a thorn in the side of this railway. You and that friend should have been turned into baked bean cans when you had the chance.
Unfortunately for Harry, Sid, Lundy, and Rob were all nearby and heard this heated exchange as Ed continued to whimper. Sid was enraged as Harry rolled back and away from Ed. Without warning, he shot forward and slammed into Harry. Surprising everybody in the yard, Sid shunted Harry further and further back until finally Harry's tender fell into the turntable well. He shook with fear as Sid advanced on him. You bastard! You dare speak to Ed like that? I warned you, Harold! Think you're a big man, huh? Want to be in charge, do you? Think you're superior to us? Well, look where you are now! In a turntable well! Not so big and tough now, are you? I'll fucking kill you! Sid backed up and was just about to run full pelt at Harry again, but Lundy intervened, rallying the duty shunter to quickly couple them together. Sid screeched, "Get off me, Lundy! He's crossed the line now! I'll fucking have him, I will! If anyone should have been scrapped, it's this little piece of shit!"
Calm down, Sid.
But Sid was too enraged to listen to sense. Even with her brakes fully on, and despite pulling back as hard as she could, Lundy could barely hold Sid back as he continued to shout at a very shaken Harry. "Get off me! He's getting what's coming to him! Let go of me! Let me pummel this twat to kingdom come!"
Rob, help me. Help me!
Rob had already rolled forwards and was coupling up. It took the combined strength of both Lundy and Rob to finally pull Sid away from Harry, shocking even Ed. Sid continued to rage as Harry looked on in sheer terror at what had happened to him. "They can't hold me forever, Harold. Think you've got what it takes to take me on? Huh? Punk? Just you wait! Just you wait!" Services were suspended for the rest of that day. Ed and Sid were escorted away from the scene, whilst Lundy and Rob assisted with the recovery of Harry from the turntable pit. It took a long time, but eventually the little tender engine was re-railed and brought back into the sheds. Lundy and Rob both abandoned him as soon as they could, instead opting to reside in the carriage sheds for the remainder of the day. The next day, Mr. Knight spoke to Ed and Sid.
Good morning, you two.
"What's good about it? We've blown it now, haven't we?"
I've spoken to Harry and I have reprimanded him for his abhorrent behavior yesterday. I told him he deserved to have been shunted into that pit. However,
He turned to Sid.
I do appreciate that tempers ran high yesterday, Sid. But you know that you crossed the line, don't you?
"I know I did, but I don't care either. That Harry insulted us one too many times, and the way he treated Ed yesterday, well, I snapped. I couldn't help it. What would you have done if your best friend of 50 years was suffering that kind of abuse? You'd act as well."
Perhaps not so violently as you did, Sid.
Sid merely glared as Mr. Knight continued.
I do not appoint any blame on you, Ed, but you must understand that this arrangement cannot continue like this. Not right now. Emotions are running too high, and I'm afraid that I will have to arrange for you both to go home.
Ed looked sadly at the rails beneath him. The very rails that he and Sid had helped to relay. The rails that he and Sid had run on for several years, trying to be of assistance to this quaint little railway. Now, he was being asked to leave the line that he had helped to kickstart back to life, and leave the new friends he had made. Sid, however, continued to scowl at the manager.
However, you are both welcome back in the future, and I very much hope that you do so once things have calmed down, and perhaps once Harry has ended his current boiler ticket. I very much appreciate everything that you have done for us, and...
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
No. What?
No. We will not be coming back. I have seen many things in my life, but the blatant disrespect I see here is astonishing. If anything, Harry should be sent away, not us. He's bullied Ed almost into submission, he's mouthed off at me and the others, and he's proven that he doesn't have any regard for anybody else. Yet, he's allowed to stay here. I guess it's easier to just let him get away with it once you send us back home. Frankly, I am ashamed of you, Mr. Knight. We came here with the best of intentions, wanting to do our best to get the railway operating, boost its profile, and get things started before your own engines arrived. But now, I feel that you've done us a great disservice and have let Ed down greatly. It's all well and good saying that you've reprimanded Harry, but you've punished Ed for trying to be a good engine. And on that note, we're leaving.
Sid,
No. You want us to go? We'll go. As soon as you've got a lorry sorted out for both of us. Good day to you. Mr. Knight looked pained as Sid led Ed away. Two days later, Mr. Knight had arranged for two lorries to take Ed and Sid back home, both due to arrive later in the afternoon. Lundy came over to them to see them off.
Well, I guess this is goodbye for now.
I suppose it is. I'm really sorry for the trouble we caused.
Don't be silly. It's not either of your faults. Trust me. If I had my own way, Harry would have left, not you two.
Still, would have been nice to stay longer.
It would have. But I promise you, I'll come and visit you on the Dark Railway when I get the chance.
Promise?
Promise.
I can't even. Ugh, so gross.
You are funny, Sid.
Chub.
Until next time, good luck, guys.
Thanks, Lundy. Cheers, I guess. Lundy departed to take her train, leaving Ed and Sid to wait for their lifts home. However, Sid had spotted Harry in the sheds nearby and called out to him. Happy now, Harold? You've got your wish. We're leaving, and we ain't coming back. Harry looked like he was on the verge of smirking until Sid shot him down. Listen here, you little creep. Ed cares very much about this railway, and Lundy. I suggest that you leave her alone, keep the railway running without issue, and keep your big mouth shut. Otherwise, I'll break my promise and come back here, and I'll personally see to it that you're damaged enough to be scrapped. Do I make myself clear, shitbag? Harry cowered in fear at these words, but did not respond, satisfying Sid. I don't think he'll cause any more trouble. Yeah, I hope not. It was soon time for the two engines to depart. Rob came over to shunt them towards the lorries, being deliberately slow so that he could say his farewells.
I am most disappointed to see that you are both leaving. It won't be the same around here without my Midland pals. I'm going to miss you two.
We're going to miss you too, Rob. Thank you, Rob. I hope everything will be okay around here.
I'm certain it will be. Myself and Lundy will keep Harry in check. It is a great shame that he couldn't just accept you two for who you are. That's not the Great Western Way at all.
It certainly isn't. Well, goodbye, Rob. Yeah, thanks for everything.
And the same to you both. I hope that we meet again one day.
Ed and Sid said nothing as they were shunted away from the station for the last time. Both of them looking forward to going home, but equally lamenting the fact that they may never see the Castleman's Railway again.